This is the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate everyone for being here today. I wanted to follow up on a couple of things, and I apologize if these have been answered as I had to step out for another hearing. We talked about the increase, and we know that China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea has been geopolitically aligned for quite some time, and you talked about this renewed relationship, and I don't necessarily think that's the proper phrase for it, maybe a strengthened relationship through import-exportation increases. Do you feel that and to quote you, sanctioned oil exports that's going on between Iran to China has actually helped to strengthen the relationship in that geopolitical alliance?
It has.
And would you say that putting stronger sanctions, as we had in the previous administration, and redesignating the Houthi terrorists, which my colleague had just mentioned a second ago, would help to limit the Iranian proxy militia's assets and resources?
I think, Congressman, I think sanctions have to be imposed internationally because Iran has become a master at how to evade sanctions, and they're actually passing on their best practices to Russia right now.
Well, they're passing on their best practices to Russia, but China has been the greatest and the most nefarious when it comes to circumventing sanctions and not following them, and yet we still consider them to be, by some people's context, a competitor, when in reality they're actually an adversary. And I think that we need to start recognizing that the evolution of warfare, and this is something that General Langley, I really applaud because he's understood this and presented it very well. The idea of the evolution of warfare has gone well beyond the ideas of the first bullet that gets fired. We're now in warfare from a kinetic perspective. We've been in a cyber, a resource, a supply chain, and an economic and influence campaign by China for decades. There has been an ongoing Cold War that in many cases we've ignored through our failed foreign and domestic policies, which we all know is intrinsically linked. And we've allowed China to exploit Africa as a nation to where now they control 15 of 16 rare earth mineral mines. They continue to promise railways like they did between Djibouti and other areas to try and link trade rails. They promise electrical terminal capabilities with 100-year leases to try and create these reliances that has weakened America's ability to be able to compete with them in the non-kinetic influence capabilities. So my question is that for AFRICOM, what could we do to provide more resources and assets to help to fight and to be more effective in these non-kinetic elements of influence campaigns for developing nations?
Congressman, thanks for that question because we know that we can't keep up with the Belt and Road Initiative, the billions of dollars in the infrastructure, but what our partners are telling us, don't force us to choose, but we still want you because of the value. The value of your proposition and intrinsic value of what the United States offers holistically is very compelling. So I'd say that what we're seeing in Southern Africa, we're seeing some positivity as far as through health diplomacy resonates, and we need to tell that story better.
I completely agree, and I would also say that speaking with other allies, I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee as well. The BRICS that has come out with Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and trying to invite also KSA into this, my understanding is that it's great in theory to try and in some way be a counter to the Quad, but in reality, there is no actual economic or trade benefits to it whatsoever, so it's not worth the paper that's written on. So I think that we give it far more credence than it needs to. General Corella, I really want to talk to you about something when we talk about Tower 22. Look, like yourself, I spent 7 years in Iraq. I spent 3 years in Afghanistan, was in Kosovo during that wonderful campaign as well. Been in Pakistan, Somalia, helped very much with the 2016-17 push for Fallujah and Mosul from the private side to help with ASV teams to retake. And we know about hardening structures. We've done indirect fire, cheap measures actually, with just simple 4 I-beams and a top. Knowing that Tower 22 had had an attack a year prior, knowing the geopolitical ramifications of where things were ramping up, understanding that Jordan, given the October 7th incident and our increased attacks against Hamas and support of what's going on, how was it that Tower 22 still had no hardened structures?
So, Congressman, the investigation is still ongoing. I'll be happy to provide that through OSD when it's done. What we did do is we moved as many T-walls across the AOR as we could. I think we put like 9,000 over the last year. I was at Tower 22 about 2.5 weeks ago and looked at the physical construction of the things there. I think one of the challenges, you had a counter UAS. I'm having to balance where the greatest risks are for that. We did have 1.7.
Gentleman's time's expired.